This season turn it up to 10. Sorta like a bad habit, we gon' do it again. Ready or not, we're gonna tie up some ends. Go tell her 36 tracks, his alone. Since the land's been slain, we can each belong. The Lord is my strength, my peace, and my song. Get I'll lay it all down at the feet of his throne. This yoke is easy, this burden's light. Even with a loud mouth trying to eat at the mic. Even if we down south, the humidity spike. Veils torn in tubes, so we gon' be alright. It's all grace till the Hoff goes off. Heretics better run till the top blows off. Got them all stood still like a jaw full of Botox. Time to break them down like a jaw on a blow pop. Don't stop, they're in need of it though. Through grace by faith, they could easily grow. New wave, new age, new way to see bro. Now one truth, life, one way to his throne. Up like the cataract. Google it, we ain't dropping any rhetoric. Or maybe so, but that's for you to find out. Don't get tossed to and fro by any loudmouth. What you think it's Indiana Jones, son? It's the year of the feast, we gon' grow some. Time to put some meat in the bones. Gotta put the milk down, son, it's time to leave home. I'm just saying there's a time in the season you gotta be a Berean. If you just hear and believe it, you could be walking with demons. It could be rendering Caesar. All the things that go to God, that's a little like treason. Wait, welcome back, my friends. Did you ever really think we could pass the 10? Our stocks up, we about to trend. Cause the whole 36 wanna rap again. Wait, sounds too good to be true. Like rabbinic candy land, ain't no ladders, just shoot. We hold true if it's loaded in the cannon. Best believe it's understanding. If it's not, it ain't proof. Like sacred name of the two-house frame. You start to tickle, then you fill it in the blanks. You better not, you be better off. Not trying to hassle Hoff, you can take it to the bank. This night ready, he's about to go off. Put the ring on your finger from the Cracker Jack box. It's hide and seek, let's see if you can find out all the little messages you hit before the timeout. Ever seen a scholar with a blue belt? I have, he's about to make your food melt. The loud one and he strikes again, but don't let him close range, he gon' bite your friends. So relax, got it still in control. He knows every care, every bit that you hold. He knows every hair, every need for your soul. Nothing new around here, this story's been told. I bet you feel weak and your life is in tatters. With bruised feet, your body is battered. You can't reach, trying to climb up that ladder. Sit back and hold fast till Messiah matters.
These guys are laughing.
It is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. This is Messiah Matters number 483. It's The Secret Show. My name is Caleb Haig.
And it is Tisha B'Av, which is in the Jewish religion the saddest day of the year, mourning many different calamities that are all identified with happening on this day. Although I don't think any of them actually happened on that day. Maybe, maybe not. But it's a fast day, so I'm Rob Vanoff, and I might read the Book of Lamentations later today. I don't know yet, but that just to reflect upon the fact of the temple's destruction. I think it is, whether you observe the fast, which is a tradition or not, it's still, important for us to remember that the temple was destroyed, and that is by God's decree, right? That was God's wrath. And it's crucial in understanding our biblical theology for redemption. Yeshua is for the place of the priesthood in terms of Levitical and Aaron over against Yeshua's priesthood, etc. All this stuff is tied together. So even if you don't accept that it's a obligatory fast day, which is the tradition, it's still it has good associated with it, in my view, of remembrance.
And you never can tell. Israel is in an interesting place currently. Iran is just looming, right? It could be today. It'd be poetic in some ways if Iran attacked Israel today on Tish B'Av. Maybe that'd be too obvious though, right? I mean, maybe Israel is maybe they're just ready for that. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, well, on that happy note, welcome everyone to the show. It is Tuesday, which is different. It's that obviously different than Wednesday. This is anyway. Rob has family in town and is going to have family in town tomorrow and said, hey, can we do the show a day early? And I said, well, heck yes, we can. And so interestingly, as the chat room starts to fill in, a lot of people are saying, hey, this is a rare time I get to join because normally it's on Wednesday. Oh, I froze Rob. Hang on just a second. Let me unfreeze Rob. There we go. Okay. So yeah, welcome to everyone who's not normally here in the chat room. We are glad that you're here, and we expect some lively interaction today. And Beth says, good evening from chilly, wet Perth, Australia. We have other friends in Perth. So yeah,
Dr. Ben.
There is a growing amount of Torah observant believers in the good old Australia, both West and East Australia. I hear it's a big place. I think it is. I think it's large. Okay, sorry. I forgot to turn my phone off, and that always spells trouble when I don't turn my phone off. There we go. All right, here we go. Let's jump in. We got some stuff to talk about today. Lots of stuff, actually. And so the very first thing that we're going to do, and make sure that I didn't freeze Rob, which I didn't. The very first thing that we're going to do is say, be a part of the conversation. Chegg at TorahResource.com, Chegg at TorahResource.com. That is the email address. And also 253-465-3205, 253-465-3205. That is the phone number. You can call us, tell us how much you love us, hate us, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You won't talk to us. You can listen to past shows and buy merch on MessiahMatters.com. And of course, TorahResource.com. Now, I told Mike that I would do a quick little maybe advertisement. I don't know what you want to call it for this. The Young Scholars competition there's only 3 days left. Only 3 days left. So if you have a child who is 18 or under, who has written or is writing a essay for the Young Scholars competition, now is the time. Get your essay in. Your kid can submit under your profile, or they can create their own profile if they have an email address. You can do all of that at the trlearningcenter.com. The essay is supposed to be 1,500 words or less. We have given a grace period. If you go over by a little bit, you're fine. Once you hit 2,000 words or more, you're going to start getting docked a little bit for every 500 words over that amount. But that's neither here nor there. 1,500 words, try to keep it around there. And we're excited. We have submissions already rolling in. And
tell them you'll take them to like frozen yogurt or something.
Yes, exactly. 31 flavors.
Dangle the carrot in front of your teens.
Yes, exactly. And actually we've gotten some who I think the youngest did we get somebody who was not a teen yet?
Nice.
I don't remember
that. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, you only got 3 days left. Submit them now. And we are very excited to see what is produced in the Young Scholars essay competition for TorahResource.com. Okay. And there's, of course, cash prizes. So, I mean, come on. How can you go wrong there? Last but not least, do not forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you're already subscribed, hit that like button. I give you permission. It really does help us. Okay. Let's jump in. Now, Lois is in the chat room. So while she's still there,
that's number 23 to you, my friend.
That's right. Number 23. Lois has been with us since day one. And so I suppose I need to frame this for people who don't know what we're talking about. Last week, we talked about about statues and images in worship. And we were talking about the Catholic view of statues and the Greek Orthodox view of 2D pictures, and how these are used in worship, and how I believe that the Torah is very specific. We're not allowed to use these things in worship. And so, because they're images, right? You're not allowed to make any image of anything that is in heaven or on earth and use it in your worship. And of course, if you want to see that conversation, you can go see that conversation. There were questions about what about the bronze serpent and all these kind of things. Okay, so we had that whole conversation. Lois writes in, she says, so Caleb, are you saying you'd have a problem with banners people use in worship? Say a banner with a lion and the words Lion of Judah. Okay. So once again, I think that there is a difference between having things, maybe, a Bible verse on a banner in your sanctuary somewhere, or, I don't know, something like that would be maybe a map of Israel. I don't know. People have things in their sanctuaries and in their places of worship. However, I think when we start using them for worship, now we have a problem. Full disclosure, I have never understood the whole flag waving thing during worship. I think I don't get it. And I don't want to down people who are way into it, but I don't get it. I don't see it in scripture. I don't understand why people would do that. And quite frankly, if there's an image on it, let's take Lois's example, like the Lion of Judah. If you got a lion on a flag that you're waving around and using up front in worship, to me, that's creating an image of something in heaven or on earth. I think we had a comment from someone too that said, well, the cross is okay, but the crucifix with somebody on it with a depiction of Jesus is not. I disagree with that too. I am very uncomfortable when people have crosses in their sanctuary up front and people are praying towards a cross. Once again, we're making images of things in heaven and on earth. So I'm uncomfortable with all of that. I don't understand why people would need to use stuff like that. We don't see examples of that in scripture. So I don't, my answer is no, I would not use that kind of stuff in worship. Rob?
Well, I think maybe what Lois is referring to is like in the book of Numbers, and elsewhere we learn that the tribes had banners. They each had a degel, it says in Hebrew, or a nes, which is like some sort of banner, and that there were likely some sort of image or representation or symbological,
But what was it for?
Sign or whatever, and it was for rallying the tribes, particularly. We're told about in their formation in settling around the tabernacle in the wilderness, and then also their order of marching when the cloud would move and they would follow. So my limited experience in the Hebrew roots arena in the last 25 years is some places have banners representing the tribes of Israel.
Sure.
And people like rally, I'm from this tribe, or in some sort of quote unquote dance. It's not that people are like identifying with one or another tribe specifically, but rather it represents a celebration of the covenant and, the tribes as being representative, just as they are in the book of Revelation. The names of the tribes are part of the temple, right? Part of the new city. So anyway, I'm okay. People, if they want to have representations of those. I'm
not against flags. Yeah. I'm not against flags. That's not, and I'm also not against.
I misunderstood then. I thought that we're talking about a flag having like California has a bear on it in the state of California, or
I don't have a problem with flags or anything like that. It's when we start using them in worship. That's when we don't see flags being.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks for clarifying that.
We don't see people. We don't see people. The tribes bringing their flags into the tabernacle.
Good, fair, and I think that's right on. So yeah, I would agree with you there.
So a couple of comments in the chat room. Lois says, I don't get worship with flags either. Kristen says, from what I understand, flag waving is supposed to be like a move of the Spirit. Having semi-grown up in the Pentecostal environment, that's been my observation, but not biblically based. Yeah, I mean, once again, I think that and I'll kick this back to you in just a second, I think that we can do things that aren't necessarily found in Scripture that are perfectly fine. So, for instance, marking the day of Shabbat by lighting candles, or we're not commanded to actually break a loaf of bread. Some might disagree with that, depending on how you view. But anyway, the point is that we do, right? We often break bread and bless the bread in a certain way. There's nothing wrong with doing these things. So I'm not saying that anything that we do in terms of worship has to be found in the Torah or has to be found in the Scriptures. But what I am saying is as soon as we start taking images of things and using them up front in our worship services, we are starting to cross a line from the way that God specifically tells us to worship into the way that he tells us specifically not to worship. He says, do not make an image of anything in heaven or on earth. Now, I take this to mean to worship. And some people are going to say, well, I'm not worshiping it. But the problem is once again, back to our conversation from last week, you know what? The Catholics say, well, we're not worshiping the statues. There's a line that is being crossed, I think. So why not just keep all images of anything out of our worship service and just worship the Lord? That's my point, Rob.
Yeah, I get it. I agree. I pulled up Josephus real quick because I was trying to find, I think it was Josephus. He describes the zodiac images being on one of the temple curtains. And so I just, it occurred to me and I thought I could find it real quick, but
once again, not sanctioned by God, right? I mean,
oh, exactly.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on that I think the Messiah, when he comes second time, is going to make it all right.
So this is Josephus. It's let's see here. It's Josephus' Wars of the Jews in Book 5, and he's talking about. He said, before the doors, there was a veil of equal largeness with the doors, a Babylonian curtain embroidered with blue, etc., mixture of colors. And then he says, the curtain had embroidered upon it all that was mystical in the heavens, excepting that of the 12 signs representing, I'm going to have to look at the Greek. I only have the English here. It says, excepting that of the 12 signs representing living creatures. So I'm not saying, maybe I misread that in the past. I'll have to look at that later. But anyway, he's talking, it seemed to me that there was some sort of images embroidered on that veil. So
I mean, I always think it's interesting when we're looking at the descriptions of the temple. Like, clearly, there was corruption going on, right? I don't think that there's any doubt of that. Some interesting stuff now going on in the chat room about flag waving. Mike says, at a community that we were a part of, the dancers always had issues. At a community that we were a part of, the dancers always had issues with the flag wavers. So the dancers and the flag wavers were always at each other's throats, right? And then Kristen says, yeah, my husband finds them distracting. And this is the point. Every time I've gone to any community where they have flag wavers or even dancers up front or anywhere, I've found it extremely distracting. It's personal. I understand. I understand that this is a personal, it's kind of like when everybody up front is wearing skinny jeans. I don't get it. I think that it distracts from what we're supposed to be doing. It's cultural, I'm sure. My age certainly plays into it. Like, I get that I'm like the curmudgeon old
how is this tying into, because, in some of the more masculine toned Christian preachers, you see like tats, like full sleeve tats, some with like full vibrant color tattoos. is this at all related? In your thought?
I think that you got multiple things going on there. I think that there is a misunderstanding of Torah, but at the same time, I have very good friends who are pastors now, who came from a life that was completely other than, they were living a life that was where tattoos were something completely different, and face tattoos and that kind of thing. And now they've given their life to Christ, and they're pastors. I think every single thing is a case by case basis. I guess my point is that a lot of the time, worship services become a more of a show than anything else. You got fog machines, and you got a light show, and you got dancers, and you got flag wavers, and all this kind of stuff. I am now once again, I admit this is my age. I'm 43 years old. And to me, and probably the way I was raised as well, I was raised much more in I was raised in a non-denominational Christian church. And so, but the pendulum swung even further for me. I'm much more of I like a cappella hymns. Let's just sing some a cappella hymns. To me, this is much more my style of worship. Now, I understand that this is personal preference. I understand that it's my age, probably, some of the way I was raised, although I was raised in much more of a upbeat kind of worship service. But I'm the old curmudgeon, man. I'm just like, hey, man, let's get some hymn books. Let's sing a couple of hymns and worship the Lord. That, to me, that's the perfect worship service. But okay, let's move on. I hope that answered your question, Lois. So this was not on our show notes. Rob's never heard this. He's going in blind on this one.
I am blind here.
So Byron called in, and we've talked about this before, but I wanted to revisit it quickly, because I didn't want him to think that we were ignoring his question. So let's just take a listen to this.
Is, in light of the fact that we're grafted into the Jewish vine or tree, where does that leave us in regard to any inheritance we may or may not have in the land of Israel? Just curious. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I would change the language there. I don't think that we're grafted into Jewishness or Jewish.
Right.
I think that we're grafted into Israel, and I think that is different than Israel is not an ethnicity. It is a group of a multitude of mixed people from all nations that come in and are covenant members. Granted, the main base of Israel is a ethnicity, which is part of the 12 tribes of Israel, but people attach themselves to those 12 tribes. And so I get pet peeve, whatever. So Byron asks, what does that say for us as we're grafted in to Israel? What does that mean for us in terms of land rights? Well, in Ezekiel, we see that the Gentiles do get land rights wherever they land. In other words, the Gentiles, they attach themselves to a specific tribe or the region of the tribe. And then eventually in Ezekiel, the Gentiles get land rights according to whatever tribe they are a part of. Now, of course, that's not going to be the case today. I can't be like, well, I believe in Christ, so hey, I want some piece of land. It's not going to work like that. However, I do think that it did work like that. We see that Caleb comes into the lands and he gets a piece of land in Judah. Even though there's no evidence that he's from Judah, he's just attached himself to the land. It also seems as though once a person came in and was brought into the covenant in a specific tribe, I don't know what the standard time period was. I don't know if next generation could get land rights or if it took 2 or 3 generations. But it does seem that once a person had attached themselves to a tribe, they were then integrated into that tribe and they could get land rights. That's not going to do anything for you today. But when the Messiah comes again, it seems as though land rights will be given to Gentiles. Rob?
Yeah, I agree that, you don't go to Israel to the state of Israel and, hey, like the Bureau of Lands or something like that, land management, say, hey, I'm here to get my piece. Obviously, that's not a pathway right now. But we're not looking to the government of Israel right now as the mediator of the Word of God, right? So
Right.
We're in an exile situation. We're in a situation we're waiting for the return of the king, so to speak. And so we're looking to the scriptures, and some things aren't as clear. Is like, what's the logistics of this? How is this going to work out? And sometimes we don't know, and that's part of we can speculate. We can study the text and talk about it, but ultimately we're waiting for Yeshua to come and settle all these things.
Exactly. So yeah, I do, like, just to point blank, I do think Gentiles will have rights to the land depending on how they attach themselves. And this brings in, I wrote an article one time, there's no such thing as spiritual Israel. A lot of the time people say, well, we become part of spiritual Israel when we come to Christ. Right. I don't believe that. I believe that there is no such thing as spiritual Israel. There's only Israel. You're either a covenant member or you're not. Now, obviously, I think that for the ethnic Jews to be part of Israel, and we see this in Romans, they have to believe in Christ as well. There is some kind of a physical inclusion. They can be grafted back in. This gets into a lot of really a lot of questions, honestly. But ultimately, it seems as though the Jew and Gentile together make up Israel, and that the Gentiles will have to attach themselves to a specific tribe or the land that the tribe is a part of to be able to get land rights. Okay, let's move on. I hope that answers Byron's question. Let's move on. What do we have here? Oh, yeah. Okay. This person commented on one of our videos that we clipped, and the title of our video was, "Is it belief in a future sacrificial system spitting on the cross?" That was the name of the video that we put out. This person writes back in, and the reason I grabbed this comment is because we get this every once in a while, and it's a standard view by some, and I think that it's worth talking about. They say this. They say, Paul lived in an intertestament or covenant time, 40 years, from Pentecost to Tabernacles. Ezekiel's temple can be read as conditional, more clear in my opinion, or spiritual. Christians are right to distance themselves from Torah folk on this score. Okay, so let me lay out.
Walk me through.
Not
that
a problem.
bit by bit.
I'll walk you.
Okay.
I'll walk you through it. So let's take this from some of the debates. Some people will say, well, it's spitting on the cross of Christ if you think that there should be a temple. And then the response from people, let's just say pronomian, pro-law people, is usually something to the effect of, well, Paul wrote Galatians and Romans, and then after that, in Acts 21, he goes up to the temple and he sacrifices, right? He purifies himself, and he's going to help others purify themselves too. So he can't, even though he's already written Romans and Galatians, he can't be against the temple if he's going to the temple.
And to add to that, if I could just tag on to that, he's also collecting funds to take to the saints in Jerusalem.
Right.
Like,
and
he wants to support that community that is worshiping at the temple.
So the response, and this response, I've only heard this response from dispensationalists. So if you don't know what dispensationalism is, then okay, you can look that up online. But dispensationalists will use this argument because what they're saying is that we're going from a time from the dispensation of law. And now Christ has died, and we're coming into a dispensation of grace, okay? And what the dispensational belief is, well, for some, not for all, by the way, this is not all dispensationalists, but what they will say is, when Christ rose from the dead or when he died on the cross, it wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't like all of a sudden we're in this dispensation of grace. No, there was an intertestamentum period. There was a period in between where they were trying to kind of figure it out, and Paul was still kind of just trying to bring people over from the dispensation of law.
Right, okay, so between what they do is they see, oh, my Bible has two sections, an Old Testament and a New Testament, and then there's like the time between, like the end of Malachi and the beginning of Matthew is the between the testaments.
Well, kind of, but what they're
like the lost years of Jesus kind of thing, or like
what they're saying is from the death of Christ all the way up until essentially the destruction of the temple. Okay, so we have a 40-year interim, and Paul he goes
that's what I didn't know what they meant when they said 40 years.
Yeah, so they're going to say
Passover, from Pentecost.
Yeah, so Paul is going to the temple, but it's because he's in this intertestamentum time, and so we have to give him grace in this, because as soon as the temple falls, now that period's over.
That's tabernacles. So they said something about 40 years from Pentecost to Tabernacles. Did I hear that correctly?
40 years from Pentecost. Well, this is something I've never heard before. But yes, 40 years from Pentecost to Tabernacles.
What I think it means, tell me if I'm wrong, that from Acts 2 to the destruction of the temple is 40 years. I think that's maybe what they're saying.
I think that's what they're getting at as well.
Then they're saying that the destruction of the temple, which is what we're remembering today as Tisha B'Av, is in fact the inauguration of tabernacles. Is that the interpretation?
I think that what they're saying is that the tabernacles, I don't know if they're saying that's the inauguration of tabernacles, but what they're saying is this is the point where all of the Torah is done away with. In other words, now we're in the dispensation of grace. Now the Torah might come back in the dispensation of law again once the church is raptured, but we are in the dispensation of grace now, and so we don't have to keep the festivals, we don't have to keep the kosher laws, we don't have to keep the Sabbath. None of that's all done away with. And so
I could see someone believing that.
So like now that we have,
then it represents. It's not. They don't mean it's a 8-day. 7+1 day feast at the end of the thing. They're saying it is a new era, a new age, the age of tabernacles. Right.
So let's just talk about, and actually, let me see here in my notes. I know I have a couple of references here. Change.
Then why would they be Pentecostals? Why wouldn't they be tabernacleists?
Good question. Okay, so here's...
Okay, anyway.
Here's the problem with dispensationalism. First of all, dispensationalism doesn't work. And the reason why is because what dispensationalism says is that God deals with his people differently according to sanctification and or holiness throughout time. So you have Israel dealing with, God dealing with Israel rather, and his holiness through the Torah. However, once Christ comes, now we're in a new dispensation. The Torah is no longer relevant. Now it's a dispensation of grace, and God relates to his people in terms of sanctification through grace. There are plenty, and I do mean plenty of verses that are going to say that this isn't true. Malachi 3:6, for I, the Lord your God, do not change. Therefore you, O children of Jacob, are not consumed. Psalm 33:11, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Hebrews 6:17, so when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, Isaiah 31:2, and yet he is wise and brings disaster. He does not call back his words, but will arise against the house of the evildoers and against the helpers of those who work iniquity. Psalm 102:26-27, they will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away. But you are the same, and your years have no end. So my point here is simply this: God's holiness does not change, and therefore we cannot relate to him differently in holiness. If it's an abomination to God to eat unkosher food in one period, it has to be an abomination to God in another period, because God does not change. His holiness does not change, therefore we're not consumed. So the point is dispensationalism does not work. Beyond this, the idea or the notion that there's some 40-year intertestamentum period in between the dispensation of law and the dispensation of grace is simply not biblical. Show me any evidence whatsoever, except for the fact
it
that
reminds me of the claim of the Mishnah that, today, the 9th of Av, is the day that the spies, it came back and God decreed that they would be in the wilderness for 40 years because of their disobedience. It's the day that Solomon's temple was destroyed. It's the day that the Romans destroyed the second temple, right? It's like everything's got to be set up as like a religious kind of time frame, and so it reminds me of that. It's like it's an artificial construct to help people organize their thinking about the Bible.
Well, to me, but
it leads, but it's not based on reality, and that's the problem. It's like we have to discern the difference between the Word of God and the traditions of men, and this is a crazy imposed framework.
To me, what's happening is you have people who say, well, my argument against Torah doesn't work according to the Bible, so I'll make something up. The only evidence for it biblically is that my argument doesn't work unless I make it up. So clearly, since I believe that the Torah has been done away with, I have to, that's the proof. The Torah has been done away. It's circular reasoning.
That's
the Torah has been done away with.
The starting point is that it can't be this. Therefore, I must find some other thing that answers the difficulties.
Exactly. So if anyone ever brings up to you the idea, and Mike's right, intertestamental is reference to the period between the writing of the two testaments, Old and New. I completely agree with you. I think that this person used this term incorrectly. Intertestamental period usually references the time period between the writings of the apostolic scriptures and the writing of the end of the writing of the Tanakh, which is about 300 to 500 years, depending. And so anyway, the point here is simply this: the person used the term wrong, but they're attempting, and I've heard this argument from dispensationalists before, though. So the point is they're trying to come up with some way that they can sweep under the rug that Paul went to the temple and that the apostles are in the temple, and they're still not spitting on the cross of Christ. But anyone who says that the temple might return or that we should be keeping the Torah, they're spitting on the cross of Christ. So anyway, if someone brings this up to you, this is the response. Dispensationalism is not a biblical theology. Okay. Anything else on that before we move on?
Yeah. And to suppose that Paul and Peter and James and John didn't fully understand what Jesus taught, but we do. That's, man, like you really want to run down that road. It's strange to me. They didn't understand the fullness of the revelation. I'm
very confused by this comment. Beth says, question of 40-year period. What about the comment found in rabbinical writing Yoma 39b, where the scarlet thread did not turn white? Would this indicate that their sacrifice was not accepted? I mean, I would have to look at it, but I don't put any weight into the rabbinical writing.
That might be the section. Yoma is for the Day of Atonement. That's what that whole tractate is about. So what it is talking about, there's a series of 40, again, the same kind of thing. There's, I believe, a list of 40-year things. For 40 years before the destruction of the temple, For 40 years before the destruction of the temple, like these 5 things were true. Similar to like 5 catastrophes on the Jews on the 9th of Av, and here they are. It's, but some people have said, that relates to, roughly to Yeshua's death 40 years before. Later rabbinic lore that's just what it is.
Lore.
Later
exactly.
rabbinic lore, yeah.
Let's move on. I want to just touch on this very quickly. These are a lot of flash pan kind of things. Anyway, Maria says, I so appreciate you two. And by the way, this is in our discussion about Gamatria and Mystery Bible Theater 3000 last Friday, the whole lechem thing and bread, bait lechem and whatnot. So if you missed it, go watch that. He says, I so appreciate you too. Thank you for being so clear on Gamatria and other esoteric teachings. Sure, I'm thankful for you, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And then she says, what was that on Nero and 666? So very quickly, in Revelation, they use some numeric devices. 666 is the mark of the beast. There's a variant there in some of the texts. It's 616 instead of 666. Both 666 and 616 can add up to the name Nero. And I believe that this is exactly what's going on. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't telescope down to a different prophecy later, but I think that they are talking about Nero, at least in their present time. They're understanding this as Nero, no matter what the future prophecy may be. And so I described this to Maria, and she wrote back and she said, I'm confused. I thought we didn't believe in Gamatria. There are certain times, correct, we don't believe in Gamatria. However, there are certain times in the Bible where the authors clearly use numeric values to signify things. Now, what I mean by Gamatria is I can't take, a saying of whoever in the Bible. Moses said X, Y, Z, and he used a word bread, and now that word adds up to this, and so I'm going to now connect it to a different numbered word here in this text, and I'm going to try to connect them and make some secret meaning. I'm going to find the secret meaning that is hidden in code for this. That's what I reject in terms of Gamatria. When the Bible clearly uses some kind of numbering, and I'll give you an example. In Matthew, we see that there is a specific numbering. It seems as though the genealogy is off a little bit, and people haven't been able to figure out why. Well, they have been able to figure out why, because Matthew seems to want to have a certain number of people between each grouping of people. So there is a numbering here that he is attempting to get to. And we do see this kind of thing throughout the Bible. 666 is another one of them. Clearly, the author is using numbers here to mean something. There's no he's not hiding something like, and there's a word here, and then we have to decipher that, oh, this word is actually supposed to be a numeric value, and then we're supposed to, follow the clues and find another verse that has this same numeric value, and now we're going to come up with some secret meaning. That's not how interpretation works. However, when our authors clearly are using numbers, I don't think there's anything wrong with us interpreting those numbers the way that the authors clearly are having us interpret them. Rob?
Yeah, I think that the Nero is a good explanation that can explain both the 666 and the 616, because depending on how you spell Nero. On the other hand, I also see a lot of strong plausibility with just it's kind of pointing to Solomon in a way, Solomon's fall. That is, like, I think 666 is the number of it's a measure of the gold that he had accumulated in 1 year in the Book of Kings. And then there's a bunch of sixes involved with when Daniel describes the measurements of the image, I think that Nebuchadnezzar set up. So I think it could have multiple, it's deliberately ambiguous to prod us to consider options and to see these connections. Now, it doesn't mean that, like, I think we did a short, or we did a mystery Bible theater on, I don't remember the guy's name, but he's like a messianic rabbi who was talking about the Gamatria of 490 and how
that was last Friday, yeah.
And forgiveness and all these different concepts all go together because 490 is the magic number. That is just that's nonsense, in my opinion. Like, that's somebody trying to invent and create ooh and ah and that sort of thing, and that I reject that completely. So if anybody didn't see that, you can go and watch that video from our mystery Bible theater. But yeah, we do have a couple instances. We have Jeremiah the prophet does some things with Hebrew letters. Isaiah does some things with Hebrew letters that are part of their communication. But they're prophets, you know. They're allowed to do that.
Well, they convey to us that that's what they're doing. That's the point. It's not us. It's not like we have to pick out words and find, you know, it's not a Sherlock Holmes mystery where we have to pick out the words, come up with the numeric value, and then connect it to other words that come up to the same numeric value. That's not what's going on. The point is that when we see numeric values within the scriptures, we're basically told, hey, guess what? There's something here that you need to understand about numbers. And that's where we say, oh, okay, not a problem. Let's start looking at that. As soon as somebody says, hey, you can take any words you want and come up with the numeric value and then connect it with any other word that has the same numeric value. This is not how the scriptures work. This is not how Yeshua taught us to interpret the scriptures. This is not how anyone in the scriptures has ever spoken. Moses never taught us to do this. This is a later rabbinic invention, and it's something that I think is not of the Lord. I think that it's actually a distraction. Anything else on that before we move on?
Nope, that's it.
We're coming to the end of it. Last one here. All right. I didn't think we were going to get through all these, but here we go. So the reason I pulled this comment is because I just wanted to show that what happens when you don't have a solid canon. This was a comment on our video, Mark 7:19 and the newer interpretations. So if you don't know Mark 7:19, it is thus Yeshua declared all foods clean. And so we did a whole show, a deep dive show on this specific verse. You can go watch it. And then we clipped a little portion of it. This person writes and they say, Matthew got it right because Matthew was an original disciple, unlike Mark. Matthew received the word as once delivered to the saints, which we must contend for according to Jude. Matthew declares it was a matter of eating with dirty hands and have nothing at all to do with what foods were eaten or not. Sorry to inform, but an enemy has done this. There is the leaven of the Pharisees in our modern Bible. So,
oh my goodness gracious.
This comes down to inerrancy. This comes down to canonicity. This comes down to the idea that some people believe that our Bibles have been corrupted. There's absolutely, by the way, no evidence for this. In fact, if you get a chance,
I would venture to say this person has not even remedial skill in reading, like,
of course,
Greek or understanding. They're just going to they've got scissors. And they're going to start cutting stuff out of the Bible saying, oh, this is leaven of the Pharisees in our modern Bibles. I understand. I would agree with that there are translations that lead people down the wrong road. I would agree with this person on that. But they don't discern that because they're calling out Mark. They're saying Matthew was the original disciple, Mark wasn't. And therefore, the modern Bibles have leaven. In my mind, the way that sounds is that they're associating the bad translations of Mark to Mark himself, to Mark and authorship. And that's like that. That's so sorry. That's ignorant.
I love how you said, like, I don't know exactly what you said, but something about like cutting out. The thing is like as soon as you say, hey, there's some bad leaven here, or, you know, the Pharisees got in and changed some things, you can literally you can make whatever theology up you want.
Yeah, because the book of Hebrews needs to go, the book of Jubilees needs to come back in,
or you can just say, well,
you're Dr. Frankenstein.
You can say, hey, you know what? This portion in Philippians 2 where Paul talks about Christ not thinking it necessary to retain his position with God. No, that's been corrupted. I'm just going to take that out. You know, now I can make whatever theology I want because I can just cut out the things that I don't like and say, oh, this was Pharisees. You know, the leaven of the Pharisees has gotten in here. You can cut out whole books, or you can cut out just sections, or even just words. And this is how we make a religion unto ourselves. This person unfortunately, is if they haven't already, they're teetering on the idea of making themselves into the God that they worship, as opposed to worshiping the true God. We do not get to pick and choose. Canonicity is an extremely and by the way, we see this in our modern times with some of the horrific teachings going on. Sean Griffin is a perfect example of this. No language skills whatsoever, couldn't put together a Greek sentence or read a Greek sentence if his life depended on it, yet he's making all these horrific theologies from texts without being able to even understand what the texts say. And by the way, Anthony Rogers just absolutely destroys him when it comes to the Greek originals, because Sean Griffin thinks that he's just able to pick and choose whatever he wants in terms of, I don't need to know anything about these texts at all. I can just figure it out. And then he just blames it on, that's just a scholarly view. The point here is simply this: as soon as we decide that we can add new books or take books out or whatever, and we can mess with the canon however we want, basically all we're doing is building up a religion that we want. It's a personal religion, and the God of that religion is self, because I get to choose now. I get to choose what's right and what's wrong, and that's all there is to it. Go for it, Rob.
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Oh, come on, you do. You do. All right.
No, I mean, we're dealing with, I don't know. I'm still trying to learn how to describe like what this world is like. Yeshua, he used parables. He's like, what is it? What is the kingdom of heaven like? It is like, such and such. But we're in such a crazy thing where everything's upside down, and I really don't know, where people are getting. I don't know. I feel like I don't even know how to talk about like what's going on in the world today. It's so crazy. But invention of religion and the claim, like, I know someone who's like I know him personally, went off on how the King James translators actually created the Bible. Like it was so idiotic. But it was like the idea that the Bible was invented, like there was no Bible. And before that. And people, I think what they do is they read like a Wikipedia page, or they read someone who's a disgruntled, church member or something, who's read a little bit of Bart Ehrman or whatever, and then they let that be their information. And that's like eating junk food. That's like trying to live on junk food. It's not nourishing. Nourishment for our soul comes from our relationship with God, which comes from regeneration by the Holy Spirit of our hearts, whereby we have faith and we have that new life, and we, it slows us down, and we just, we can't be so quick to just say, this is, I like the idea of equating Mark or trying to pry between Matthew and Mark, because Matthew was the original disciple. Mark was later. Therefore, we can't trust Mark because he's got signs of the leaven of the Pharisees, and that even our modern Bibles reflect that. If I was talking to that person, if I met that person, I don't even know where I would start. Like, I don't know that I'm equipped to have the discernment. Maybe, Lord willing, someday I will, but to like be able to ask a question that gets right to the root of the matter, because it's so scattered and ungrounded that it's like
But you know what? We can take
I don't know, man. Sorry, I know I'm babbling here.
There's a younger generation coming up who has the truth. And if you're one of those, then you should submit your essay for the Young Scholars Competition.
Thank you for
deadlines
the
deadlines in 3 days. Submit today, and you could be the winner. All right. It's going to do it for us today. We will hopefully, Lord willing, be back next week And I don't know what we'll talk about. Send us some emails. You can send emails to chegg@TorahResource.com, CHEGG at TorahResource.com. You can also call our comment line, 253-465-3205. It's 253-465-3205. And tell us what you want us to talk about. Tell us your topics or some Bible verses that you're looking at. And, of course, last but not least, do not forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I know it sounds weird, but it really does help us. We hope that this conversation has done at least one thing, and that is to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Why? You know why? Because Messiah matters.